1. Checking my email is the last normal thing I remember before waking up in the hospital, except for a few scary as fuck bits here and there. Hence this comes from my own direct recollection, with the gaps filled in by my wife and other witnesses. I had a full tonic-clonic seizure, right at my desk. Details are mostly irrelevant here, but I've never had a seizure before, and initial assessment is that it was probably a perfect storm situation, with a new prescription that I was on, hopefully never happen again. My wife was in the next room and of course called 911 and the ambulance showed up. Problem is I was postictal, which is a post-seizure state where you're essentially not in your right mind. But when two big dudes came into my house unannounced and in a big hurry moved towards me, I went into home defense mode. The fact that they were clearly in EMT uniforms and were there to help me was lost in the scrambled mess my brain was in, but my more basic instincts were working fine. I don't think I actually assaulted the EMTs, as they just kept their distance and radioed for police backup. When I started yelling at them, apparently, "Get the fuck out of my house, I don't want to fight you." And so the police sent one guy. Now I remember feeling extremely protective of my wife, and convinced that this home invasion was serious business, now that this third party was coming towards me and attempting to physically restrain me. I don't remember, but I'd bet you dollars to donuts that the millisecond he rolled his shoulders forward and widened his stance is the second that I went from uncooperative to full apeshit. It's just what you do when you're trained to fight. And there doesn't seem to be another option, as when you are protecting your family like I thought I was about to have to do. That's when things started getting ugly. I was an amateur MMA fighter about 15 years ago, with a local dojo, and while I haven't practiced in a long time, I can tell you those instincts never fully leave you. I know how to reverse any submission hold a local cop is likely to be able to proficiently attempt on me, apparently even while postictal. Before backup arrived, I had swept the leg of the officer and had him in an armbar. Thank fuck I didn't go for a blood choke whilst my brain was short-circuiting. I was also screaming, roaring apparently, at my wife to call the police. The irony of my request was lost on me at the time. That primal roar was the scariest sound she's ever heard come out of my body, so she tells me, and I didn't stop roaring. Luckily for him and me, cop number 1 didn't put up any further resistance until his backup arrived. 5 more big dudes showed up, now 6 cops plus 2 EMTs plus my wife, no weapons drawn, no tasers. Fortunately, they knew they were walking into a medical call, and boy, they should get a medal for how well they handled it. I wasn't going down without a fight, and 1v1 was no contest even though they were way above my weight class. But with sheer overwhelming force, they pretty much wore me out and then dogpiled me to the ground, cuffed me in the back, and then stood me up to walk me to the ambulance. Big mistake. I easily spun my way out of the officer's control grip, hand on handcuff chain, another on my shoulder, and gave him a frontal kick to the breadbasket. He probably won't forget anytime soon. "Bring it, fuckers," I remember thinking, or saying, who knows. I also remember being this weird mix of scared, emboldened by my recent escape, and pissed right the fuck off all at the same time. Still cuffed, front kicks were the new order of the day. I was like the goddamn free sample guy at the supermarket, giving them out to anyone who came near me. Details are loose on what happened next, but I guess they did some kind of brute force team tackle again, and got me to the ground. And from the cuts on my wrists, they may have used some kind of pain compliance technique with the cuffs. It didn't work, as I was able to shrimp my way out from underneath the guys on top of me, and throw a nasty double heel kick from lying down. Fortunately, it just grazed the guy on the shoulder rather than the neck or head, which is where I would certainly have been aiming. Next thing I remember vividly is being face down on my living room carpet, barely able to breathe, thanks to being out of shape these days, with at least one big guy on my back, and thinking this was the end for me. Then they'd raped my wife and let my cat out in the cold winter night. They weren't screwing around at this point. Apparently, judging it worth the risk, while I was pinned, the EMTs shot me in the ass with some kind of chemical restraint. And the cops just sort of sat on me and let my wife try to calm me down until it had taken full effect, and I was strapped to the gurney in soft restraints. When I woke up, over a full day later, combination of insomnia plus seizure plus downers plus 1v6 cage match really wore me out, I guess. I was bruised to shit, but aside from some minor cuts on my wrists from the cuffs and a nasty hole in my bottom lip from me biting it during the seizure, I'm a lot better off than I could have been. I have some nasty pins and needles in my hands, so those cuffs must have been torqued fairly hard, by me or the cops, who knows. But I'm told by my attending doctor that should go away in about 6 months. When I got home, I called the police to apologize and thank them for getting my combative ass to the ambulance. Thanks to them for being incredibly good sports about the whole thing, and not pressing charges, especially given my level of enthusiasm. I'm still trying to wrap my head around just how badly this could have gone. Eesh. The unpredictable seizure alone is bad enough, without nearly suiciding by cop, had there been a weapon within reach. Scares the bejesus out of me just knowing how absolutely out of control I was. 2. I'm a college student and my Wednesdays are awful. I'm pretty much going non-stop from 9:30 AM to 8:30 PM. Last Wednesday was a struggle. One of the classes is a 4-hour lecture on world film history, with screenings of films as described by the professor as not to entertain. Great. Naturally, I fall asleep in that class. I figured that this week I was gonna try and use caffeine to get through that class, and the rest of the day. Now I can probably count on one hand how many times I've had caffeine. 1, because I hate coffee. 2, because while I'm not a morning person, I generally don't have a problem with alertness in the morning. My friends applaud me for that, and tell me not to start drinking caffeine now. I should have listened. So my plan is to put some Mio Energy in my water bottle, and take it throughout the day in small doses. But when I get to my local Rite Aid, there's no Mio, so I decide to buy some 5-hour Energy. Now if you don't know what's in a 5-hour Energy, I've now found out it contains about 200 milligrams of caffeine. For comparison, your generic espresso contains around 64 milligrams. I think nothing of it and buy the fucker. The next day before my film class, I decide to take half the bottle so I can stay awake through the next 4 hours. Once I start sipping, it immediately kicks in. Like I can feel my brain shift 12 gears. This is perfect, I thought to myself, and I head down to class. I'm soon disappointed because I start to doze off anyway, given that the class is at 1 PM. After film class, I have calculus, and I'm afraid I'm gonna suffer a caffeine crash during that class, so I decide to take the rest of the 5-hour Energy. This was where I fucked up. Caffeine takes about 6 hours for half of it to wear off. I did not know this fact, and thought it took 5 hours for everything to be out of my system. In calc, I start sweating, fidgeting, and getting the worst foot cramps of my life. My professor keeps glancing at me like I'm a tub of gasoline and lighting a match. But I could get through the class alive. Everything seems okay until I try to go to bed. I have a 9:30 AM class tomorrow morning, and at 3:30 AM I'm saying to myself, I am wide the fuck awake in the middle of the night. So I decided to try and tire myself out. I start running up and down the hallways of my floor like a bat out of hell, and apparently one of the girls next door, I live on a co-ed floor, gets up to go to the bathroom and hears me doing my best get-out challenge. She looked out the peephole and saw me jet across like demons got me. So fast that she didn't even know it was me, and she freaks out. She calls my RA in the middle of the night, and she comes out into the hallway, and while I'm in mid-sprint, I almost shit myself because someone popping out in the hallway at 4 AM wasn't really on my mind. Luckily, she's really nice to me and simply asks why I'm running around like this, and I tell her I had too much caffeine. And she just tells me to do my best to keep still in my bed and try not to fidget. Now, I don't know if it was her telling me that or the fact that I probably just ran 2 miles on our floor. But it worked, and I went to sleep. Or so I thought. I wake up at 2 PM. Yes, I missed my 9:30. And my roommate pops in and tells me that I freaked him the fuck out last night. He tells me that I woke him up out of his sleep, started spouting gibberish at him, walking and fidgeting and then banging my head against the window multiple times. I've never sleepwalked before, so even when I got my brain to go to sleep, my body said, "Nope, your ass is still awake, bitch." I'm never taking 5-hour energy again. I'll just have to suffer through Wednesdays. 3. It was my final year of my undergraduate degree in physics, and in the last year students are required to complete 3 labs from a list of about 20. My lab partner James and I decided that we wanted a challenge for our last ever lab, so we asked our professor which one was the most difficult. We were told the Zeeman lab. No one had tried it for years. It's located in the old optics lab under the stairs, which is currently serving more as a storeroom of random junk, and has half of the ceiling tiles missing. The task is to measure something called the Bohr magneton, measure of the magnetic moment of an electron at 9.27 times 10 to the minus 24. That's a very small number to measure. We're allowed to do the lab however we want. But the suggested method is to use a mercury vapor lamp, shine the light through a set of mirrors to create rings, impose a magnetic field over the bulb, and photograph how the rings change as you vary the magnetic field. We measure where the rings are, how they move, and do some maths. Pretty simple idea, but we're working with really shitty equipment, and we have no lab manual to tell us anything. The problem right away is the mercury bulb. It's unshielded, so gives high doses of UV radiation, which causes bad headaches. Whilst we're ramping up the magnetic field to insane heights of about 1.5 T, note that 2 T is the whole body ceiling for exposure, and 0.0005 T is the limit for pacemakers. We're having some problems with the images. The incredibly bright light is lighting up the whole room, which really messes with the photographs. Since we need the equipment to be working at its physical limitations, that isn't good enough. Plus I have a headache and we probably need to be in the lab for another 5 hours to get it done. I have the amazing idea to place a bit of plastic binder folder between us and the light bulb. Does the trick really well and we get some great images. We're looking over what we have in the other corner of the room, 15 meters away. Can't put the computer near the magnetic fields when the plastic folder decides it's a bit too hot to be solid. It's melted down to the cardboard, which has caught fire. Since the place is such a mess, there are papers and old lab books everywhere. And that's all smouldering too. The wall that the whole lot is resting against is burning, and is making its way to the ceiling. The thick blackout curtains around the area are just threatening to start when we realize that there's an odd sound coming from the corner, and a horrid, acrid smell. There's black smoke coming out, and it sets off the fire alarm 1 floor up, probably due to the hole in the ceiling. In a moment of absolute stupidity, I grab the burning plastic folder, getting melted plastic on my hand in the process. I have no idea what James is doing, and no time to find out. The lab demonstrator was coming down to check on us when he saw the black smoke and heard the fire alarm. He has a pacemaker and our machine is still churning out a magnetic field 3,000 times stronger than is safe. So it turns off, or goes into a kind of safety mode. We're both ushered out and taken outside. The whole building has to be evacuated. The fire brigade are already on their way because of the alarm, but they call an ambulance for me with my burnt hands, James with his coughing, and the lab demonstrator who is looking a bit pale and not feeling so great. The burns aren't too serious and healed up pretty well with only minimal scarring. James is all fine, and the lab demonstrator gets his pacemaker restarted. The optics lab is not in such great condition, but they contained the damage to that room, and it didn't spread too much farther. The university no longer offers the Zeeman lab until they've reviewed its safety, and they're going to start supplying documentation and instructions for all the equipment. It'll probably be a couple more years before anyone does that lab again. James and I were able to measure the Bohr magneton to within an order of magnitude for the data we'd already collected, and we ended up getting perfect marks. 4. I'm an 18-year-old man, half Italian and half Irish. I am pretty impulsive. Add hormones into the mix and you got a deadly stupid concoction. I am typically a pussy when it comes to trying new foods, and don't really like hot, sour or sweet foods. I prefer the happy medium of everything. The spiciest food I've had before this fuck-up was a bag of those Fuego Takis. So anyways, on to the fuck-up. So I was at home, watching my little brother play a video game, Not sure which, may have been Mario Kart. When my mother came home from the store, she asked me to help her with the groceries and then help her with cooking. I have started helping her out with cooking because it's going to be a great life skill to have. I help her getting all the groceries inside and start helping her put away various foods into the pantry, refrigerator, freezer. I look down into one of the bags and see something that I was not expecting at all. A few green, phallic, dangerous-looking specimens. I picked up the green chode-looking thing and asked my mother what it was. She told me it was a jalapeno pepper. I was surprised because despite our family's Italian heritage, we don't usually like spicy things at all. To put it into perspective, some of my siblings won't touch certain kinds of sausages because of the slight spicy tinge to it. Now, before we keep going, some additional context as to why I was as impulsive as you will see. I just gotten done watching a few videos of people eating the Ghost and or Carolina Reaper peppers, so I was sort of familiar with the whole scale of spiciness when it comes to peppers. The Ghost pepper has about 850,000 to 1 million Scoville heat units. A Carolina Reaper has about 1.5 to 2.2 million Scoville heat units. A jalapeno pepper is about 2,500 to 10,000 Scoville heat units. Pretty stark contrast, eh? That's what I thought too, my dear Redditors. That's what I thought too. Anyways, back to the fuck up. I asked my mother if I could have one of the peppers since there were about 5, and she said she only needed 3. I was allowed to have one, which I gleefully accepted. Now, I am stupid, but I'm not that stupid. I had to make sure it was clean and adequate for human consumption, so I grabbed my little chody foster friend and brought it over to the sink, and bathed it in glorious water. My mother turned around and said, "By the way, the pepper may be spicier than you would think, it's fresh, and still has its seeds." Now me being, well, me, I respond with, "Don't worry about it, Mom, you're Irish, and I'm Italian. I got this, it's in my blood." Note, my mother and I are dicks to each other because we share a sense of humour. I'm not unironically a disrespectful cunt. She just sighed and said, "Don't tell me I didn't warn you." I shrugged off any kind of apprehension I may have had and took a massive bite. I'm talking like 2/3 of this fucker. I began chewing and started just examining my phallic prey, just looking at the intricacies of the inside of a pepper. I begin to feel it. I begin thinking to myself, oh, that's got a bit of a kick. After about 10 seconds it hits me, holy shitball, this chode is going to kill me. According to my mother, who was watching me the whole time, my face started going red while I just stared into nothingness, with a stare akin to that of a soldier having flashbacks to Nam. I began to tear up, and made one of the worst mistakes of my life, rubbing away my tears. If you ever try something really spicy, you will likely be told that no matter how much you want to, do not rub your eyes or you'll be in for a world of hurt. Well, with reckless abandon, and no real idea of what I was doing because biting into that pepper was on impulse, I rubbed my eyes. I can swear I saw my mother's eyes go wide, and time slowed down for me in your stereotypical slow motion voice. I hear her yelling, "What the hell are you doing, you moron?" Everything was slow. Pain began to slowly crescendo its way into my eyes. As time went on, the pain began to slowly sink in. I started looking around, still in tunnel vision, pun intended, and slow motion mode. I became very lucid in my mind, having existential thoughts such as, is life a lie? Why am I still here? Why do I exist? I was jolted from my pseudo-existential crisis by the pain. Immediately, tears of agony began pouring out of my eyes, akin to that of the debris of a near-light-speed particle collision in the Large Hadron Collider. I start yelling, "Oh God, why? Why didn't you warn me?" While simultaneously rushing towards the sink to wash out my eyes. Have you ever seen someone drunk run? Well, neither have I, but I'd imagine it looked like what I did. I ended up running my side into the corner of the granite counter near the sink, slipping and hitting my head on the floor. I got back up pretty much instantly because the adrenaline was coursing throughout my entire body, and dunked my head under the faucet and let the water take my optical virginity. My mother was behind me saying, "Good God, you're bleeding!" I asked her while sounding like I'm being waterboarded, "What do you mean I'm bleeding? I ate a pepper." She then tells me that I have a nasty gash on the back of my head from when I slipped. Well, I was concerned, but I was still facing off against the evils of a Mexican vegetable. I think I had my eyes under the water for like 10 minutes, but I could be wrong. When I was done, my mom said we were going to the hospital to get my battle scar checked out. One trip to the hospital, once again, pun intended, and 4 stitches later, I come back home, go down to my room and just collapsed onto my bed. Reflecting on my traitorous, impulsive ways. 5. Shortly after Easter, my son had a seizure that scared the hell out of my wife and I, because when he was suffering the seizure, he appeared dead. It was truly the most horrifying thing I've experienced in my life. Because of this, we decided it would be a good idea to take CPR classes. We found that the library near my in-laws' home was going to have a free CPR training session with EMTs that would be conducting the course, and it would only take 15 minutes to complete. So we made arrangements for my in-laws to watch my 2 children while we took the class and signed up. Now you need some more backstory. My youngest son is in diapers, and we use cloth diapers. It is very cost effective and less waste is going into the environment. With cloth diapers, you usually want something called a wet bag. The wet bag contains the diapers and their stink until it is time to wash them. On with the story. The day of the training was Monday, July 10th. We packed our children in the car, brought them to my in-laws, and went to the class. The class went well. We learned CPR, and it is a lot different from the last time I learned it 20 years ago. As a side note, I highly recommend CPR classes to everyone. It doesn't take long to learn how to do it, and you may actually save a life. We left the library and then went to pick up my children. When we got there, we had found out that my youngest had a horrible bout of diarrhea. However, we forgot to bring a wet bag and put the soiled diaper in. No big deal, this has happened before. We'll just put it in a plastic shopping bag, tie it off, and transfer it to a wet bag when we get home. Well, we didn't get home until late and the boys were cranky and tired. I grabbed the baby bag and we get them into the house and right to bed. The next day I go to work. I live close enough to my work that I am able to go home during my lunch hour. 12 o'clock comes and I walk out to my car. Now mind you, it is July in the Midwest of the United States. The temperatures in the afternoon are approaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius. I get to my car, open the door, and get blasted by heat and the smell of feces. It was horrendous. I got in my car and found that in my rush to get my children in the house, I grabbed the baby bag with the clean diapers, but left the bag with the soiled diaper from the previous night sitting on the floorboard. And it had been baking in there for the first half of the day. It is now Thursday, and the smell in my car is no better. Because when I turn on my AC, I get hit with a blast of the smell of baby diarrhea. I think I will need to change the cabin filters and empty a container of Febreze in my car. Or just light the damn thing on fire. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Embarrassing Stories, episode 59. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. I apologise if I sound a bit rougher than usual. I'm having some throat trouble. Well, I've been having throat troubles for a while, but my voice is a little rougher than usual. I'm starting to feel the onset of a cough. Hopefully that doesn't get too bad and I'll be able to get tomorrow's video done. Fingers and toes crossed. I'd be happy to get it done than not. Okay, with that, I am going to shut up, probably for the best right now, and head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.